여러분, 안녕하세요. So I often get requests from intermediate learners to explain the differences between 다가, as었다가, 더니, and as었더니 because they all don't have the direct one-on-one equivalent in English. And what's interesting is that for each pair, one is just the past tense form of the other, but all four of them express different things. So in this video, we'll dive deeper into learning and practicing how to use them naturally, and we'll start with 다가 and as었다가 first. The first difference is that 다가 only used with verb, so it should be verb 다가, whereas as었다가 can be used with both verb and adjective. So that's the first grammatical difference between the two. And let's start with 다가's meaning, what it expresses. So 다가 expresses mainly two things. And before we get into the explanation, let's look at some example sentences first. So try to guess the meaning of 다가 by looking at the English translations. So first one, 자다가 이상한 꿈을 꿨어요. 공부하다 to study. 잠이 들었어요. 잠이 들다 means to fall asleep. And the next one, 밥을 먹다가, to eat, right? To have a meal. 밥을 먹다가 전화를 받다, to get a call, to receive, answer the phone. So 밥을 먹다가 전화를 받았어요. So now, let me draw something simple for you to show you what 다가 expresses. So the first thing 다가 expresses is, so one action, let's call it action A. One action is already happening. And then, at some point during that action, another action begins to take place. Or let me rephrase it, another unexpected or unplanned action begins to take place. In this case, you can use 다가 to connect two actions. So the first example, 다가 expresses this exact thing. The act of sleeping, 자다, starts first, and then at some point while 자다, while sleeping, the person dreams. The person starts to dream. So you can connect 자다 and 꿈을 꾸다 using 다가. So in English, it can often be translated as while, and you might be wondering if you could also use the conjunction 으면서 interchangeably with 다가 in this context. And actually, that's not possible because there is a difference between 으면서 and 다가, which is that 으면서 is used when two actions are done intentionally at the same time. Whereas 다가 is used when the second action wasn't planned from the beginning. It happens unexpectedly while doing the first action or without intending beforehand. So for example, guys, if you say 운동하면서 while working out, 음악을 들었어요. You listened to music. This one implies that you had the intention to do both at the same time. But if you say 운동하다가, this time you use 다가, 음악을 틀었어요. So this time a different verb is used, which is 틀다, which means to turn on. So while you're exercising, you turn on the music. So this sentence suggests that you didn't originally plan to play music, but you ended up doing it during the workout. So that's the main difference between 으면서 and 다가. It's the two actions that you do simultaneously, intentionally, whereas 다가 can also express two things happening simultaneously, but that something has to be unexpected. That happens while action A was already happening. So that's the main difference between the two. And similarly, with 자다가 이상한 꿈을 꿨어요, nobody really goes to bed thinking, I'm going to dream today, right? Dreams happen unintentionally, so 다가 fits better here too, instead of 자면서. And now, let's move on to 다가's second usage. So 다가 can also be used when you are doing one action, but then another action happens that causes you to stop the first action and then switch to the next action or the next state. So in this case, the key point is that the first action isn't fully completed. It gets interrupted and it transitions into that. So for example, let's say you are studying, 공부하다, and then you fall asleep. So when you fall asleep, you can no longer continue studying, right? This action inevitably gets interrupted. So in this case, you can naturally connect these two actions using 다가. 공부하다가 잠이 들었어요. And same with the next example sentences. You were eating, 밥을 먹다, but the action of eating got interrupted by you answering the phone. 전화를 받다. So you transition into the second action with the first action pause or incompleted. So now that we know what 다가 expresses, let's practice making sentences ourselves with 다가. So let's try translating these three sentences. I injured my arms while swimming. So if you're confused about the word order when using Korean conjunctions, just remember that in Korean, we usually mention what happened first. So keeping this in mind will make things much simpler when you're making your own sentences. So swimming, of course, happened first because at some point while swimming, you injured your arms. Or you were swimming and you injured your arm and you had to stop swimming. So 다가 can express both. So to connect those two actions, we can use 다가 수영하다가 while swimming, 팔을, I injured my arms. 팔을 다쳤어요. So that was pretty simple. How about I bumped into a friend when I was on my way to work. So you were on your way to work. You could say 출근하다, which is the verb for going to work. Or you could also say 회사에 가다, literally to go to a company, to go to your office, your work. And while on your way, at some point you bumped into a friend, right? So we're trying to express this. So 회사에, let's use 회사에 가다. 회사에 가다가, I was on my way to work. 가다가, you bumped into a friend. So for bumping into someone, you can use either 우연히 만나다, which means coincidentally meet, so come across, or you could also use 마주치다. Either one is fine, but let's use 우연히 만나다. 회사에 가다가 친구를 우연히 만났어요. The last one, I was watching a movie and a really sad scene came on, so I started sobbing. So watching a movie happened first. 영화를 보다. 영화를 보다가 a really sad scene came on. So scene is 장면. 나오다 means to come out. So a scene came out. 슬픈 장면, sad. 슬픈 장면이 it came out. So 나와서. So I started sobbing. For sobbing, you can use the verb 울다, which means to cry, right? But if you want to emphasize how much you cried, like you cried profusely, you can use the onomatopoeia word 펑펑 and say 펑펑 울었어요. 슬픈 장면이 나와서 펑펑 울었어요, right? And here are some helpful details to note about 다가. So generally, 다가 is most natural when the subject and the two clauses are the same. So the actions that are connected by 다가 are done by the same person, right? But in everyday speech, sometimes native speakers do use 다가 even when the subject changes in the next clause. So for example, 영화를 보다가 I was watching a movie, so the subject is I. 무서운 장면이 나왔어요. Scary scene came on. And in this clause, 무서운 장면 is the subject. Even if it's not 100% grammatically correct, it's contextually clear that you were talking about your own experience. This second clause relates to my experience anyways, right? So in this case, it's totally fine. So it's not something you should take like too strictly. And also, 다가 can also be shortened to just 다. So you can say 수영하다 팔을 다쳤어요. 회사에 가다 친구를 우연히 만났어요. 영화를 보다 슬픈 장면이 나와서 펑펑 울었어요. Both are fine, both are common, both are interchangeable. And now moving on to as었다가. So as I mentioned in the beginning, although 다가 and as었다가 both contain 다가, they express different things. So let's learn in more detail. So since as었다가 uses the past tense, it actually makes sense that it's used when one action is completed and then you move on to another action. And in this case, the two actions have to be something intentional, like you expected it to happen. So for example, 문을 열었다가 you open the door and after that, right away 닫았어요. You close it right away. 바로 닫았어요. 컴퓨터를 끄다, to turn off the computer. So 컴퓨터를 껐다가, after completing the action of turning off the computer, 다시 켜보세요. Try turning it on. Again, 켜다 means to turn on, right? And how about this? 가게에 들렀다가 집에 갔어요. So you stop by the store, not stone, store, and after 집에 갔어요, went back home. So this usage is very straightforward and easy to understand. And the second one it expresses is actually very closely related to the first usage, but with a more nuanced meaning. So in this case, you did something and then after that, something unexpected or even the opposite of what you intended happens afterwards. So it's perfect for expressing surprise or regret or a result that contrasts with your expectations after the action. So for the example sentences, 가방이 예뻐서 샀어. You bought a bag because it's pretty. But after that, 후회했어요. You regretted it. You regretted your choice. So the result is something the opposite of what you intended by doing the first action, right? And 쇼핑몰에 갔다가 you went to the shopping mall and 우연히 we learned this word. 우연히 친구를 만났어요. I bumped into a friend. This was totally unexpected. I didn't go to a shopping mall expecting to bump into a friend. So you can connect them with 갔다가 here. And how about 잠깐 누웠다가? You lay down for a while. And after that, unexpectedly 잠들었어요. You fell asleep. 사진을 찍었어. You took a photo. And after that, 마음에 안 들었대요. You didn't like it. Of course, when you're taking photos, you can't really expect whether you're going to like it or not, right? So as었다가 expresses that. So 마음에 안 들었어요. I didn't like it, so I erased it. 지웠어요. So that's the main thing to note about as었다가, which is quite straightforward and easy to understand, right? And as for the additional notes, the subject of both clauses must be the same when using as었다가. And just like 다가 can be shortened to 타, as었다가 can also be shortened to as었다. So for these example sentences, you can say 예뻐서 샀다, 후회했어요. 쇼핑몰에 갔다, 친구를 만났어요. 잠깐 누웠다, 잠들었어요. 사진을 찍었다, 지웠어요. They're both correct. And before we wrap up, let's do a quick quiz, guys. So select the correct one in the parenthesis. 샤워하다가 or 샤워했다가 비누를 떨어뜨렸어요. So 비누 means soap. 떨어뜨리다 means to drop something. So which one should you use when you're trying to express I was taking a shower when I dropped the soap? You were taking a shower and at some point during your shower, you dropped your soap. So 샤워하다가 would be correct in that case. And another way to distinguish whether you should use 다가 or as었다가 is thinking about whether this first action has been completed or not. If it hasn't been completed, you use 다가. If it has been completed, you can use as었다가. How about this one? If you want to express, I had a really spicy food. So you finished this action and after that you ended up having a stomachache. In this case, 엄청 매운 음식을, since you already finished your food and the next thing happened after that, you can use 먹었다가. 먹었다가 배탈이 났어요. You got a stomachache. How about I was watching TV and fell asleep while I was watching TV. In this case, you can use 보다가 잠들었어요. You watching TV was interrupted by 잠들다, by you falling asleep. How about the last one? 코트를 벗다가 추워져서 다시 입었어요. Or 코트를 벗었다가 추워져서 다시 입었어요. If you want to express, I took off my coat and after that, it got colder, so I put it back on. So you finished taking off your coat, you successfully took off your coat, and then the weather changed, so you put it back on. In that case, you can use 벗었다가, and if you use 벗다가, it would imply that the action of taking off your coat hasn't ended. So you are in the middle of taking off your coat. It's not off your body yet, but then you notice the change in weather, so you put it back on. So that's how 벗다가 and 벗었다가 are different. And now, before we move on to the next pair, let's watch a few scenes from the Korean TV shows where you can hear 다가 and as었다가 being used. 순남이는 밥 먹다가 어디 갔나? 순남이는 밥 먹다가 어디 숨었나? Sunnam is the girl's stepsister, but she's not at the table even though her rice bowl is still there. So in this context, the girl uses 다가 to express that Sunnam went off or hid somewhere in the middle of eating, as in before she even finished her meal. And it shows that the first action was interrupted.
야, 뭐하냐? 그래, 내려갔다 빨리 다시 올라와. 야, 뭐하냐? 그래, 내려갔다 빨리 다시 올라와.
내려갔다가 빨리 다시 올라와. In this sentence, as었다가 expresses one action being complete and then the next action happening.
다 같이 한 곳으로 갔다가 모두 불리해질지도 몰라. 그런가? 다 같이 한 곳으로 갔다가 모두 불리해질지도 몰라. 그런가?
다 같이 한 곳으로 갔다가 모두 불리해질지도 몰라. And here, as었다가 expresses something unexpected happening as a result of an action. And also, guys, you might have noticed that a lot of online videos use as었다가 in their titles when they want to emphasize a twist or an unexpected turn in the story. So you can see how common this grammar pattern is used. Okay, so now let's move on to the next pair, 더니 and as었더니. So in Korean, when you see 더 in a grammar pattern, it often relates to the past, like past experiences or observations. So this is true in patterns like 던, 더라고, 더라도, and 더니 and as었더니 that we'll learn right now. So let's dive into it. And the first difference between 더니 and as었더니 is that 더니 can be used both with verbs and adjectives, whereas as었더니 can only be used with verbs. So that's the first grammatical difference. And let's move on to the differences in meaning. So starting with 더니. So how 더니 can be used is that it connects two observations. So in the first clause, you include something you saw or experienced in the past. And in the next clause, you talk about a related result to that or the contrast that you see now. So one important point about 더니 is that 더니 can only be used when talking about someone else or something else, and it's very rarely used with oneself, the first person subject like I or we. So let's get straight into the examples. 지수가, so this sentence is about 지수. 지수가 어렸을 때, when she was younger, so childhood, 어렸을 때부터, since her childhood, 음악을 좋아하다. She liked music. And by using 더니, what you're expressing is that the first thing you said is something you saw or experienced about 지수 in the past. And you're about to say what's the case now with 지수, which is 지금은 유명한 가수가 됐네요. Now she has become a famous singer, in which case this would be a related result to the first clause. Since you're comparing the past with the present about someone else, using 더니 to connect the two sounds very natural. And the next one, 작년 여름은 Last summer, 엄청 덥다. It was really hot. 덥더니. So this is what you observed in the past. 이번 여름은 this summer 꽤 괜찮네요. It's pretty okay. So you're talking about summer, right? Which is something else, not your own. And you're also comparing how the summer was like in the past and in the present. So these two clauses can be naturally connected with 더니. And let's look at the additional details about 더니. So in sentences with 더니, the subject in both clauses should be the same, or the topic of discussion should be the same. So if we go back to the last example sentence, the subject is actually different in both clauses because the first one is about last summer and the next one is about this summer. But both are discussing the topic of the weather anyway. So in this case, even if the subject is different, the topic of discussion is the same, so it's acceptable. And the second point is, although not as common, you can sometimes use 더니 with a first person subject, or I or we, if you're speaking about yourself in a more objective or observational way. So for example, if you want to say you've been coughing for a few days and eventually you caught a cold and you want to say this in a more observational way, you can also use 더니 in this case. So 며칠 전부터 기침을 하다, I've been coughing since a few days ago, 하더니 결국, eventually, I caught a cold. So sometimes you will see sentence like this where first person subject is used. So that was pretty simple about 더니. Just remember that it's often used with the third person subject, and it lists two clauses that you observed in the past and now. And that past doesn't have to be like far away past. It could also be like a few moments ago. So you can use 더니 in those cases. And now let's move on to as었더니. So as었더니 has mainly two usage, and the first one is used when the speaker did or completed something, which makes sense because past tense is used, and as a result, something happened afterward. And one important point about as었더니 is that unlike 더니, it's usually used for the speaker's own action. So first person subject is usually used with as었더니. So for example, 꾸준히 운동했어. You worked out consistently. 더니. And as a result of that, 건강해졌어요. I got healthier. 매운 걸 먹었어. I ate something spicy. 먹었더니. As a result of that, 배가 아파요. My stomach hurts. 한국 드라마를 매일 봤더니 I watch K-drama every day, and as a result, 한국어가 많이 늘었어요. My Korean got better. So that's the first thing that as었더니 can express. And the second thing it expresses is the speaker did or completed something, and then you found out or noticed something afterward. So this time it doesn't have to be in cause and effect relationship, but you did some action, and through that action, you found out or noticed something. And what you discover in the second clause can be related to your intention, or it can also be completely unrelated or opposite to your intention. So I'm sure you guys remember the conjunction 으니까. 으니까's primary usage is to express a reason, right? Like so, since, because. But 으니까 has a second usage, and it can also be used when you do something in the first clause, and then through that action, you discover something in the second clause. So for example, 밖에 나가다, you went outside, 밖에 나가니까 you discovered 눈이 오고 있었어요. It was snowing. 문을 열다, you opened the door. 문을 여니까 택배가 왔어요. You discovered that the package has arrived. 집에 도착하니까 you arrived home, you got home, and you found out 엄마가 자고 있었어요. Mom was sleeping. And as었더니 works the same, guys. It's used when you do something and then you find out or notice something afterward. Find out or notice something afterward. So when as었더니 is used in this usage, it can be interchangeably used with 으니까. So 가게에 전화하니까 I called the store and I discovered 아무도 안 받아요. No one's answering. Can also say 가게에 전화했더니 했더니 아무도 안 받아요. 선생님께 물어보다, you ask the teacher, 물어보니까 모른다고 하셨어요. 다고 하다, the quotation grammar. So she said she doesn't know. She said she didn't know. And you can also say 선생님께 물어봤더니, 선생님께 물어봤더니 모른다고 하셨어요. And the last one, 카페에 가니까 I went to the coffee shop and I discovered 문이 닫혀 있었어요. The door was closed, and this can also be expressed as 카페에 갔더니 문이 닫혀 있었어요. And let's move on to some additional details about asotoni. So again, guys, you don't need to feel pressure to memorize all these details. It's just good to take them as reference if you like to dive deeper into the grammar and like fine-tune your sentences more precisely in different situations. So moving on to the first point of asotoni. With asotoni, the subject doesn't always have to be the same. It can have different subject in each clause, but the first clause is usually about the speaker. So the verb that is connected with asotoni should be something that the speaker has done, something I did. And then in the second clause, you saw the result or you noticed something. However, asotoni can be used with a third person subject in these two cases. First one, when you were quoting what someone said, or recalling the completed action of someone else. So asotoni can be used with the third person subject when you're quoting what someone said. So for example, this one would be talking about yourself. 약을 먹었더니 I took the medicine and as a result 다 나았어요. I got all better. I recovered completely. But if you want to say 지수 said this, Jisoo said she had medicine and she got all better, you can also use asotoni in this case. So in that case, the sentence should end with the quotation form, right? Either 돼요, 레요, 다고, 라고, all those quotation forms that we've learned. So 지수가 약을 먹었더니 다 나았대요. 대요 is a sentence ending when you're quoting what someone said. So Jisoo said that she took the medicine and she got all better. And it can also be used when you're recalling the completed action of someone else. And in this case, the subject has to be different in the first and second clauses. So for example, 그 가수가 노래를 했더니, so the singer performed, the singer sang a song, so singer performed. And after that was completed, someone else, which is 관중들, the audience, 박수를 쳤어요. The audience applauded, the audience clapped. 선생님이 칭찬을 했더니, so the teacher gave compliment, and another person, which is 지수, 지수's 얼굴이 빨개졌어요. Jisoo's face turned red. So these two are the cases where asotoni can be used with the third person subject. All right, so now let's move on to the quiz, guys. Quiz. Select the correct one in the parenthesis. So 밖에 오래 있다, outside for a long time, and 얼굴이 타다 means your face got burned, so it means your face got sunburned. So if you want to express I was outside for a long time and as a result of that my face got sunburned, it would be most natural to use 있었더니, because asotoni is used when you yourself did something and you experienced the result or consequence afterward. So here I was outside, it's your past action, and my face got burned is the result you experienced. So 있었더니 is more natural. 그 가수가, this sentence is about the third person. 그 가수가 공연 후에, after the performance, 눈물을 흘리다, to shed tears. And the next clause, 관중들에게, to the audience, 감사 인사를 했어요. So 감사 인사 literally means gratitude greeting. So when you say 감사 인사를 하다, it means they officially thanked someone. In this case, using 더니 to connect these two clauses would sound most natural because 더니 is used when you observe someone else doing something, and then you describe what happened next, right? So in this case, the singer shed tears. This is something you observed, and then thanked the audience. So since you're connecting two actions by the same third person observed by the speaker, 헐리 더니 sounds most natural. And the next one, 냉장고를 열다, open the fridge, and 먹을 게, things to eat, 하나도 없었어요. There wasn't even one, so there was nothing to eat. So this is something that you discovered after you opened the fridge, right? So in this case, 열었더니 sounds most natural. How about this one? 그 사람, so this is also about the third person. 그 사람 처음에는 at first 말이 없다, didn't talk much. 말이 없다. 친해지니까, after getting close with that person, I discovered he's a complete 완전 수다쟁이. Sorry, it has to be 수다쟁이예요. It's a typo here, but 수다쟁이 is a noun that means someone very talkative. So 친해지니까, you discovered that this person is actually very talkative. So here you are describing a change in someone else's state from the first time to now, right? So in this case, 더니, using 더니 to show this contrast in their behavior over time sounds most natural. And lastly, let's move on to the translation, guys. So the first one, I uploaded a photo. To upload, you can use the verb 올리다. And in response to that, my friend said it was pretty. So this is something that you did. And after that, you discover that this happened. So in this case, using as었더니 would sound most natural. So let's try. I uploaded a photo. 사진을 올렸더니 my friend said that it was pretty. 친구들이 예쁘다고 했어요. So this was your action, and this is something that you found out after that action. And here, some of you might be wondering, shouldn't 올렸다가 work as well? Because you did this action, and after that, this happened. And this is actually not possible because, like we learned, the subject of both clauses must be the same when using as었다가. 올렸다가 sound unnatural. How about my friend started doing yoga, and as a result, their posture improved. So you are observing the third person and comparing their past and the result now. So you can connect them together using 더니. So my friend started doing yoga. You can say 요가를 시작하다, which means to start a yoga, but this friend has likely done yoga for an extended period of time, so you can just use 요가하다 as well without having to mention start, 시작하다. So my friend, 친구가 요가를 하더니, their posture improved. So 자세 means posture. 자세가 improve as in it got better, it got good. So 좋아졌어요. Using the verb 좋아지다 would sound natural. 자세가 좋아졌어요. And for the remaining two sentences, make sure you try them yourself and leave your answers in the comment section. And I will have the model answer up in the pinned comment. And now let's watch the two scenes from K-dramas where 더니 and as었더니 are used.
옛날에는 나만 찾더니 이제는 나한테만 말을 안 해줘. 옛날에는 나만 찾더니 이제는 나한테만 말을 안 해줘.
옛날에는 나만 찾더니 이젠 나한테만 말을 안 해줘. With 더니, we can tell that she's talking about someone else. And here, the mom is talking about her daughter. And she's comparing how the daughter was in the past and how she is now by using 더니.
오갈 데 없는 거 먹여주고 재워줬더니 보침까지 내놔라. 오갈 데 없는 거 먹여주고 재워줬더니 보침까지 내놔라.
먹여주고 재워줬더니 보침까지 내놓으라고. So she's basically saying, we fed you, we let you sleep here, and here you are being entitled. Here, as었더니 expresses that we did so and so, and this is the result we get from our actions. And in this particular context, it expresses a result that's different from what she originally expected. Before we really wrap up, here's a quick recap of the 4 grammar points we covered. If you follow the whole lesson, this recap should make perfect sense. So take your time going over it, and I'll see you in the next class. 안녕히 가세요, 여러분.